Yes, there is somebody else in Canada on YouTube besides Viva Fry, and his name is Clyde, or as many other people may know him, Clyde Do Something. And you know what? I meant to start in a big picture so that we could see you. How are you doing tonight, Clyde?
I'm great. I'm great. Thanks for having me on. I really
Oh,
appreciate
it's my
this.
pleasure. Okay, so we have a lot of Canada stuff to talk about, and the first thing was this trip to Kelowna, which actually is just due north of where I live. When I was reading the Okanagan, I'm like, we have an Okanagan. Is it the same Okanagan as where he was? And I mean, I probably could have gone to this. Well, no, I don't think I can get into Canada right now. Anyway, but what's the deal with this trip when you're talking here, and I'm going to play a quick snippet of it for a second. The
Mhm.
the main point you're getting across is basically that Trudeau goes on this trip, and maybe you can give us some background on it. And he basically says to reporters, like, you can't ask any questions. Is that am I getting the gist of it?
So his handlers allegedly said this to some of the media that showed up. Now it wasn't that they weren't allowed to ask questions. It was that they weren't having questions, and that if anyone was to shout out things at him, that they would be evicted or they would be removed from the situation. Now
Okay.
later another news outlet said that they would be arrested, which is evicted and then held culpable is kind of just another way of saying you're being arrested.
Do you remember specifically where you saw the eviction or arrested information?
That was from an article that I read. Believe I
So
had it in the video.
okay, yeah. Well, the reason I ask is because just like in the United States, just depends on where you're getting your news, I guess. And
Yeah.
so I'll show in a second the Daily Courier where I guess they were doing damage control because the rumor or the truth, whatever it is, got so much attention that they obviously wanted to push back on it. His handlers and administration wanted to say, no, we would never treat reporters that way. We're liberals. We love the press, and we would never just like arrest you. But yes, we did say no questions. And I want to talk about that in a second because I was in the news and I also worked in government. So I've seen it from both perspectives. And that kind of thing happens all the time. But let
Hmm.
me just give people who aren't familiar with this stuff a little flavor of what Clyde Do Something is like. This is you commenting on this trip where allegedly, again, Trudeau, not even allegedly, for sure, they did say that he told reporters no questions on this trip. The big
Hmm.
question is, what was the consequence if you decided to shout something at him? Okay, here we go.
Trudeau muted trip to Kelowna, a liberal success. The only way they can get a success is to show up unannounced and forbid any reporters from asking anything. Great job. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's summer listening tour stop in the Okanagan was as silent as advertised Tuesday. He toured a boys and girls club, a packing house, a fruit stand, with reporters invited to take pictures and videos, but forbidden in advance to ask any questions, and shouted inquiries would result in police assisted eviction from the various premises, handlers told the media. That's a very interesting way of saying you'll be arrested for asking the Führer any questions.
My favorite is
Outside
when you say Führer. Could you just say that live for us right now because you're very good
the,
at it?
the Führer.
Okay,
The,
thank you.
it's Justin Trudeau, and he answers only to the grand Q-tip, the Cotton Schwab of the World Economic Forum, as people on our channel, on the Clyde Do Something channel, know it. If you tune into the live streams,
And I have a video of not the World Economic Forum, but from the WHO, where I also think he gets some of his directives. And they're once again sounding the alarm about misinformation and all that good stuff. So I wanted to
mm.
play that in a second and get your thoughts on that. Because you guys have some legislation that's maybe going to become a policy. I saw YouTubers maybe fleeing Canada over because they could come after you for what you say if
Which
they
one?
determine it's
Which one?
misinformation.
It's a new one every week. It's a new one every week. It's unbelievable what's happening in this country. It's mirroring what happened to Venezuela not even a decade ago.
Okay. So this is what the Daily Courier writes in response after that news that you were going to potentially be arrested or at least escorted off the premise if you screamed any questions at Trudeau. And okay, the first thing I wanted to say is I love how when media parrots what government says, it always cracks me up when they just accept something as like it's not unusual, so therefore it's like it's not really news. Like the government's trying to tell you it's not really news because we do this all the time. And I sit back and I'm like, no, it's exactly news because you do it all the time. It's exactly news that you tell reporters constantly that they're not allowed to ask any questions. So I love it. Like, that's one of my favorite things when I see a media outlet that's just like, it's not, it's just not unusual, because the whole report basically just kind of says, this is how we work things. This is, there's nothing special about this trip. Everybody just calm down. I'm like, no, you're making it worse. Like the fact that you're just admitting that you tell reporters that they can't ask you questions on a regular basis is the news. So, what are your thoughts on this? Because I'll just read you a quick sentence. It says, of course, there are events that we do, like the one that day, where we don't plan media availabilities. This person's director of communication said, Cameron Ahmed. There are some events where it's just meeting with people or a tour of a location and conversations with people, and no questions from the media are planned. And that, sometimes reporters abide by the directive, sometimes they don't. That's normal. We're used to that. But no one is ever told the police are going to kick you out of if you ask the question, and we told you there are no questions here. So basically saying that's just not true. We just would never do that. So what do you think about this?
I think they're making it news again. That's what they're doing. We're talking about it again. It could have been just swept under the rug. It was an event that happened. They said a thing to a reporter, and then that reporter turned around and wrote it in his article. But now here we are talking about it again because they went in and said it's not what you think. It's not what's going on. This is just business as usual. This is how the industry works. But it's doing a double thing, right? It's lifting the curtain back so you can see who the wizard is. But at the same time, it's showing people, hey, they did that thing. Remember that thing that they're trying to cover up right now? This is the thing that they did.
What do you think also, because they're saying this was in an emailed statement and that the Prime Minister's office added, quote, journalists must always be treated with the utmost respect and be able to do their jobs. Under no circumstances should journalists ever be threatened when covering a government or political event. Our office never instructed anyone to do this. This is not how we operate. But the way that
I just want to interject there for a second.
Yes, please do.
The Prime Minister's office at the time of dismantling a peaceful protest in Ottawa in February, was talking about how they're going to, at the same time, adhere to the Constitution and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, while they were going against the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and actually using a bit of law under emergency measures to lift the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It's doublespeak. It's classic. You do exactly what you're telling people you never do as a policy.
Right. And the other thing too that I think is just, I mean, I always wonder this in the United States too, but how do you define a journalist? Because obviously the Canadian government, has no problem going after people for misinformation when it comes to, I mean, there, like I said, I could pull up the bill. I think it's like C11 or something like that. And, I'm just curious, I guess, like the idea that you're welcoming towards people asking questions or pushing back or sharing narratives that are opposite of what you're spewing out, I think it's been proved to be a lie just by the way that they handle people outside the press. I don't know. Maybe you need to give us a quick lesson on how the press works in Canada, because isn't it funded by the government?
Yes. Okay. So that's a multifaceted question that you just asked me right there. There's a lot to catch up on just in that. So Bill C11 is a piece of legislation to, its aim is to use the CRTC, which is the commission. It's like the FCC in the United States, to regulate the internet, and they want to regulate the internet as a whole. And that means user generated content, what have you. So like even your posts on Facebook will be under the jurisdiction of the CRTC in Canada if this bill goes through. Now that's a piece of legislation it involves journalism, but it also involves everything, just like from DIYs to how-to videos and all of that stuff. But what you're getting into is another piece of contentious legislation or contentious laws that they're putting forward, and that's the classification of journalism in Canada, classification of journalists. In Canada, it's traditionally like the United States of America, a free and fair journalism, free and open. Anyone who takes notes on a thing is considered a journalist so long as they're doing that. They're taking notes and reporting to the public. Anyone can publish this stuff, or anyone can take anyone's writing and put it in publication. Now, what they're trying to do is actually create a licensing board for journalism in Canada. It sounds absurd, but it's what's being pushed forward. And what they're starting with at first is like in the US, you have your press corps where you can go into see the spokesperson for the United States president, for see POTUS or whatever. You'd have to be involved in an organization, whatever. What they're trying to put forward is a set of licenses where you have to apply to get into these pressers. Now, citizen journalism is still a thing, and there's not really much you can do about that. I don't know how they're going to quash that. But in these instances, for example, Trudeau shows up unannounced to a place, all the press is there, they all get a heads up, right? So the industry standard for pressers like that is that you get a heads up as long as you do things the way we like you to do it. And then next time, if you don't, we won't give you a call. It sounds like they went above and beyond on this one. And this is what the allegations are. And of course, they're coming back and they're backstepping it, or they're walking it back a little bit. But we all heard what was said in that case. But yeah, Canadian media, the last point that you got into was being bought and paid for by the government to the tune of $1.4 billion last year. So CBC, as you may know, is government crown corporation. So CBC is only part of the whole news organization. Like, so all the different entities in news, you have your independents that are way down at the bottom, like myself, or even more organized ones like Rebel News get in there. But CBC is the top brass, and they're a state-run organization, state-run news apparatus. It doesn't get scarier than that until you realize how much money they're pumping into it. They don't allow the free market to regulate how well they do on reporting the news. The government's in there paying for that. And since Trudeau took office, they've been throwing subsidies, massive subsidies, at all the other players in the industry. So you have CBC is the government one, and then you have CTV, and then Globe and Mail, and then you have a few other players, and then all of the newspapers have all been bought out as well in the past several years.
It's an interesting issue for me because I hear a lot of people talk about how to like reformat media in the United States so that it's not ad driven and you're not influenced by advertising money or like pharmaceutical companies, for instance. And one of the solutions pitched often is like, what about, grant money from the government and be government funded? And then you look at Canada and you're like,
no.
Plus,
you don't want that.
Yeah. I don't actually think that it would change anything in the US. Like, in other words, you guys are a good example of how it could even get worse, or maybe we're all just as bad as each other. But I don't think the average reporter, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, sits back and thinks about the funding necessarily. Most of them are true believers. That's why they're there. I mean, they're there because a lot of them already align with the way things are done, and they feel like they're doing a public service. And a lot of them now, I mean, you see them publicly, big names, publicly calling to silence alternative voices in the name of journalism. And I don't get the sense they're doing that because they're like, if we don't, then the pharmaceutical companies who fund us are going to lose money and then we're going to lose our jobs. I think they're all aligned ideologically, and they're just true believers in what they do.
I don't know if they're true believers. I don't really. I know there's a grift. There's a huge grift in the news industry, and maybe you disagree with me because you worked in the news industry. But I've had accounts from a lot of people when I first started doing the Freedom Convoy thing. Because that's where I got really big on YouTube, as I was covering the Freedom Convoy, and I had a lot of people in the industry in Canada reach out to me and say, I can't say this stuff at work. Like, I want to be able to express this. So I'm trying to support you as much as I can, because I'm bound by, if I speak up, I'll lose my job, kind of thing. So there is a lot of that in the industry.
Wow. Yeah, I did not come across a lot of that in the US media. But maybe I don't know, maybe because I wasn't out there like this, so they didn't know, but you would have these like secret conversations in the newsroom every once in a while in the corners, but it wasn't mostly reporters. It would be like the people behind the scenes, the folks in the control room, or the engineers, the photographers. Those people would be the ones that I think actually were better critical thinkers than the on-air people. A lot of the on-air people, I think, were not sitting there on one hand going, I know better, and then going on at night being like, oh, this is what it really is. I just, and once you start to wake up, a lot of us, that they just leave. I'm glad that
You'd be surprised, though.
Dale,
so I know of a case, and I don't want to say where, because I don't want to out the person, but from the United States, one of the flyover states, who was working in the back end, and he was running a camera, and he was involved in the editing process. And he recalls them instructing him, when going to an event where it was a conservative leaning organization holding an event in protest, and being instructed, don't film the actual crowd, show that like barren area, and we're going to portray it as like this.
Yeah. I mean, there a lot of times too, not a lot, I don't want to say a lot of times, but like there have been times where I've experienced, like I've heard about, shoot the protest tight so it looks like there's more people there,
Well, and then do the opposite, right? When it's not ideologically aligned.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, when that kind of stuff happens, so it's like, it's newsworthy. Okay. So Kale, thank you for saying no questions about being fired from King in the state of Washington. I really appreciate that, because I got a lot of new subscribers after Viva came on. I quit my job at King in TV news because I tried to reformat my position, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. Like, this kind of brings up some of the points we've been discussing here.
Sure.
I didn't say it again.
Oh, sure. I'm just saying, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't feel like I was able to do my job as an environmental reporter, understanding the topics very well, because I had like 2 hours a day to do the research. I drove the car, I shot the video. And by the time I started to realize what I didn't know, I just didn't feel comfortable going on TV anymore, acting like an authority, and then presenting a story in 90 seconds or less, where I knew I was shortchanging the viewers. For years, I didn't have that knowledge. I thought I was doing a good job. And then I woke up and realized that there was a lot of stuff I didn't know about. I didn't know what I was talking about in some cases. I just was putting people on TV that would call back in time, but they weren't necessarily the best people. They may have had an agenda, but at least they were a warm body that I could put on TV. And when I pitched the idea to my bosses, that I wanted to do my job a new way, they just didn't bite. And so I left. And so then I took this job at the Department of Natural Resources under the Public Lands Commissioner, Hillary Franz, who will run for governor of our state. And she may win in a couple of years. And they caught wind of my YouTube channel, which they knew I had. I'd started covering censorship during COVID. They knew I had it when they hired me, but they have a vaccine mandate. And they told me that if I continued interviewing people who had any questions or skepticism about the mandates, that they said it was undermining their policy. And in order to maintain my employment, I had to stop interviewing those people. I refused to comply with their censorship demands, and I lost my job over it. So just a clarification on that one. But so I've seen it from both ends. That's why I bring it up. Like I've seen it from the media, and I've seen it from the government. And when I worked for DNR, I didn't do this part of the job. I just shot videos, but all the press conferences were very curated. I mean, what you see coming from Trudeau's handlers it's true what they say. It is common. It doesn't mean it's right, and I actually think what's more interesting about it is that in a lot of cases, you probably wouldn't have to arrest or evict the reporters because they just abide by the rules. Like, that's the weirder thing to me, is that a lot of them just abide by the rules anyway, because they're like, we're all, we just play nice with each other.
I think the big problem here is not that people didn't know or whatever, or like that this isn't how it's done. it's what happened was they went unannounced to a little town that doesn't normally have pressers like this. Kelowna's not a big place. It's not Ottawa. It's not Toronto. It's not Vancouver. So they go to Kelowna for this little photo op, and their local reporters come out, and the local reporters have to be told how the system actually works. And I'm sure there's a lot of young, ambitious guys that are hoping to make the big time, and then they show up and they're like, I'm supposed to just take photos and then write a nice fluffy piece for this guy. Like, yeah, maybe they were surprised by the fact and then wrote about it as if it was the first time they ever heard it. And probably it could have been that case. Small town.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, what's it like because people know you're a mechanic, right? That's something you talk about on your channel.
Yeah. So for those out there that don't know my channel, don't know me, I'm a automotive mechanic. I'm certified. I've worked in other industries. I've worked in the mining sector. I've worked in a bunch of different other areas. But yeah, I'm a Red Seal technician in Canada, which means like an ASE certified, I guess is the term in the United States. We have ASE certification here as well, so I could get that. But that is my day job, and that's what I do. I just happen to be very passionate about economics and about politics, and so I read a lot, and I get into the philosophy of these ideas, and I spend my spare time thinking about and talking about these things. So that's kind of how I got into the position that I'm at.
All right, the next topic I want to switch you to is farming, because can you tell me why all of a sudden, I know that the cuts in nitrogen were an issue a couple years ago, weren't they? But it's resurfaced. Is that because Trudeau has taken some new action, or because of the protests in the Netherlands? Why are we hearing all of a sudden again about Trudeau and farming cuts? Emissions or nitrogen cuts?
So if I was to, maybe if I started with the lead, bury the lead, or whatever you call it in journalism, and just say the most of the people in farming and most of the people in the industry believe that this is not about emissions. It's not about for the environment, because of the numbers. If you crunch the numbers, they believe that this is about bankrupting farmers and taking their land. And this is not a sentiment that's only in Canada. It's not a sentiment that's only in the Netherlands. It's around the world right now, and it's mainly to do with countries that are towing a particular agenda. This one that ends in 2030, and it all happens. They all seem to be talking the talking points of the World Economic Forum. So if I wanted to bury the lead, that's where I would start there. And when you get into the actual environmentalism and the numbers, it doesn't seem to make sense when it comes to nitrogen, especially in Canada. If you looked at the numbers, was it Quick Dick McDick is another YouTuber, a farmer from Saskatchewan, who put out a video just a few days ago, went viral, where he talks about in it farmers and how they actually have been reducing nitrogen over the years. Nitrogen, it costs a lot of money to get this fertilizer. They put it in the ground, and they spend lots of money with consultants and groups to test their soil constantly, determine what parts of the soil are going to need X amount of nitrogen, because they don't want it to leach off, not just for economic reasons, for ecological reasons, but for economic reasons. They don't want to spend money on fertilizers and it not going to the plants. So leaching off is a loss for their industry. So they've been working for a long time to get this, the reductions down for their own economical reasons. And then the government comes in and says, we want you to reduce it further to 30% by 2030. In the Netherlands, I believe it was 30% by 2030.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like it is very similar, right? I mean, and you're right to just wonder why the same numbers, and where's it coming from?
Yeah, it's not just these countries. I think they just announced it in. I was reporting on this morning. They announced this in Ireland, that they're going to, by 2030, reduce it by 30%. And Either. And I mean, people can make the decisions themselves. I'll just bring the facts to the table. I'll give my opinion and then people can make a decision. But all of these places are making these reductions, even though the industries are getting more efficient, and there's already food shortage issues around the globe right now. And a lot of the world is hoping that Canada steps up to the plate and to fill a lot of the issues because of what's happening in Ukraine and other places. That we could fulfill orders for food by a certain time, and yet they're putting these standards down all at the same time at all these places all over the world. So people are wondering, because the numbers don't make sense, if there's an intentional reason to bankrupt farmers and be able to take over to purchase land, and which has been a trend in current years with certain characters, maybe computer guys that got themselves into the agriculture business recently.
Yeah, and I don't know what's going to happen here in the United States, but we have farmers who are very concerned about similar problems. I mean, it hasn't been, I think, worded the same way, but I'm actually really into farming and where my food comes from and all that stuff. Like, I buy direct from ranchers. I like grass-fed, grass-finished beef, pastured chicken, all that stuff. I'm really into it. But and I would love to see more of that kind of food production. But I don't understand, like, anyone who really understands farming knows that it does not make a whole lot of sense to blame the farmers when the government's policies in a lot of ways are what got us to where we are, and consumers. I mean, if the consumers aren't there, if they're not going to pay for it, or they're not interested in it, I mean, to just look at the farmers and go, sorry, you're out of here, like, we're just going to cut your, force you to do things differently, like overnight. I mean, you think about Sri Lanka. I just did a video about that with an author and professor at the University of Washington on regenerative farming. And, they're like, hey, we're going to do it in 10 years, which was already kind of aggressive. And then it's like, no, actually right now you can't import any more fertilizer. That's it. And then just to think that that's the way to go. And if you really wanted to figure it out, they could. So I always ask why they don't. Why aren't they involving people who could actually, like the people who would say, hey, yeah, we'd like we'd like to raise our cattle on grass. Let's figure it out. Let's do it. But they don't. It seems like they're like intentionally excluding people who could help them out, doing things in a way that wouldn't create global unrest. Almost like, either, like you said, it's not about farming at all, or they just don't care, or they want it. They like the protest. That plays into their deck of cards somehow. I'm not really quite sure how.
Well, and this is what I like to get into, and I like to ask people, put the question out to other people, like, do they believe that this is intentional, or do they believe that this is out of ideological stupidity? And it's not like it's the first time that we've seen ideological stupidity. We saw this in the Soviet Union. We saw this with Chairman Mao in China. Central authorities cannot work economies. You cannot, from a central position, determine what crops are going to be grown when to seed, and then put quotas on farmers. These are the things that lead to famine. And we know this, it's well documented. So, but while it was happening with these leaders like Mao and Stalin, they were so blinded by their ideology that they thought, we just need to get to the end goal. It doesn't matter how bad it gets. So is it ideological stupidity, or is it designed? Is it this way because they want it to go that route? That's the big question.
Yeah, no. And I don't know. I guess it's hard to know. It really is hard to know intention unless you're in somebody else's mind, right? But if you didn't want global unrest, and or if that was more of a priority to avoid it, you'd think you would try a little harder. I don't know. I mean, I guess I just, because part of me wonders, like, James Corbett on the other day, and we were talking about the contentious subject of depopulation, which I'm not going to go into in depth here. Because that's something he talks about quite a bit. That's also partially why I think he's probably not on YouTube anymore.
Well, and it's not something that people from the World Economic Forum, Bill Gates himself, his dad, a lot of these people have this belief that we need to depopulate the planet. Like, this is a thing that they talk about.
Yeah, we just have too many people. And so, yeah, that's my question, is kind of like, well, does that have to be their end game, or could it be that they have this picture of the way they want the world to work, and if we lose some people in the process, who cares? Because we need fewer of them anyway. I mean, I kind of wonder if that they just see it as collateral damage to socially engineer the world the way that they want it, and because that would be a byproduct, and they want that anyway. Then big deal. I don't know. But you're right. It's hard to know. And on the note of organizations like the WF that start with W and make you want to go WTF, we're going to talk about the WHO in a second. But first, we have to talk about my wine. Are you a wine drinker, Clyde?
I am a wine drinker.
Okay. Well, buckle up, because this is the best high altitude wine you guys can get. Remember, you get 50% off these wines and 50% off shipping. These are all high altitude from Argentina, Malbecs. You get one from almost 9,000 feet. It's an extreme altitude Malbec. One from a very small operation where they handpick the grapes. Another one uses natural fermentation. So they're all very good. They're very unique. And as far as I know, there are no planned cuts to depopulate my wine. I have not heard that yet. And you do get a free bottle.
Are they on par with the nitrogen policies? They got that sorted?
I have not heard the Argentinian prime minister or president say anything about cutting emissions for my wine production. I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that. Yeah. You never know. You never know. It's a good thing that nitrogen right now is not one of my sponsors. That would be really interesting. Or fertilizer, nitrogen fertilizer. That'd be interesting. You can also get coffee if you want. If you're a coffee or tea drinker, you get 10% off your first order at twinenginecoffee.com/Allison. There's a wide variety of roasts. There's light roast, there's dark roast. They actually have leather works now, like wallets and totes and stuff made by local artisan leather craftsmen. And there's a Katura tea that's tea made from the coffee fruit. So go check it out if you're a coffee or tea drinker. Help support my work and keep interviews like Clyde coming on. Okay, so let me go to the WHO, because I want to ask about, before I play the video, tell me what you think you've learned about the influence of the World Health Organization and Trudeau's government. Do you think Trudeau is, because we talk a lot about the WEF and Trudeau, but what do you think about the WHO and Trudeau? Like, over the last couple of years, is he a true believer? Is it an influence and power thing? What are your thoughts?
So I think it's a lot like bureaucracies, right? So maybe my explanation doesn't sound so sinister. There's no guy in a squeaky chair with a cat. It's bureaucracies, and bureaucracies are a great way to implement things if you're a lazy politician with an ideology, whatever you want to do, especially when you can usurp emergency powers. And that's what they've been going for in recent years. We see that the CDC is the best way to get guidelines and turn those into laws that people will abide by as if they are laws, and then have these guidelines enforced by other bureaucracies. And then everyone always just saying at the end of the day, well, I don't answer to this. Like, you got to talk to this bureaucracy if you want to get answers. I'm just the enforcement wing. And this is how we're in a position where people are showing up in Canada airports and they're getting $5,000 fines for not using an app on their phone, which we know is malware that'll just track you. It's ridiculous. Don't put that stuff on your phone. I advocate people actually getting a burner phone to use that app if they want to use that app. But I digress on that. This is all bureaucracies in order to compartmentalize policies that you want to implement. And then it's carte blanche to do what you want in any administration. And I think this is just, the World Health Organization is just a further step towards having a bureaucracy that blankets more countries. So it makes implementation of emergency measures so much easier.
Okay, let's listen to what he has to say here, because this is trending right now. Another misinformation call. Here we go. Let me know if you can't hear it.
Stigma and discrimination can be as dangerous as any virus and can fuel the outbreak. As we have seen with COVID-19, misinformation and disinformation can spread rapidly online. So we call on all social media platforms, tech companies, and news organizations to work with us to prevent and counter harmful information. Stigma and discrimination can be as dangerous as any.
Once
the
again,
unfortunate thing about that statement is he's true. It's true. Information will spread faster than the virus that they told us would spread really fast. That's one of those things. And here's the truth: is things that they predicted didn't come true. They didn't come true, and things that they said wouldn't come true came true. So they're hardly an authority in the world on giving people recommendations, as they call it. They're deemed as recommendations, and then they're thrown out there as scripture in this this new bureaucracy, or worldwide bureaucracy, that we see here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. They all say the same thing. Like, I mean, they all, meaning the people who are in charge, that feel like they're always saying the things that the rest of us should be listening to, as if they never get anything wrong, and abide by some kind of standard that those of us on the outside don't abide by. Like, I'm just thinking about the industry of corporate news in the United States anyway. Like, whenever somebody gets something wrong outside of the corporate news environment, there's often a rush to say, not just this person got it wrong, but look at all the damage they caused. Look at the misinformation that has spread because of it, and all these consequences. But when they get something wrong, it's just an editor's note. There's no like next level analysis of it. There's no renewed calls for a crackdown on misinformation. It only is like when they're looking at the outside. So I see the same thing with the government bureaucracies, is like, you know, we can get things wrong, and it's just science. That's just the way science works. Or, you know, oh, we've just rethought things. Now we have new information. And then when somebody that's like outside of that protected structure gets something wrong, it's a threat. They don't ever see themselves, or at least it doesn't seem like they see themselves as a threat when it comes to all their bad information and all the lives or livelihoods that they've cost.
Yeah, and we're so fortunate. We're so fortunate that the treaty didn't pass. So there was a treaty aligned with Canada, a bunch of other countries. I believe the United States was involved in this treaty that was going to give the World Health Organization, in an emergency, of course, it's always in the auspices of an emergency, they were going to give them the authority as to override our own, our local CDC, or your regulatory body that gives recommendations. And that was something that was going to go through. One of our parliamentarians, Leslyn Lewis, was instrumental in making sure that didn't happen. And it was actually a bunch of the members in Africa that ended up squashing it. And thank God for that, because people in Africa have been having a really hard time with a lot of public health measures and implementation based on these big conglomerates, global conglomerates.
Yeah, that's an interview I've been trying to figure out. It's hard to get in contact with some of the folks that you're mentioning, like part of either the farming organizations or otherwise, who are like, we don't want GMOs, for instance. We don't want Bill Gates's influence here. But that's one thing I would really like to tackle. A topic I'd like to tackle is because I think, at least here in the United States, there's a hubris among the scientific community, or like, big corporations, that like, we know better and we're going to spread our knowledge and our good altruism and like help you out, you poor people in these countries where you can't, you know, you can't feed yourselves or whatever else. And they have this expectation that people will be like, yes, oh please, thank you, Bill Gates, for helping us out, thank you for making life easier on us. And then when you see them go, no, we really don't want you here, we'd rather do this on our own. I just think it's interesting, and it doesn't get a whole lot of press. Like back when, you know, Bill Gates is just one of those guys, for whatever reason, the corporate news here in the United States, and I worked in Seattle for 6 years, where he lives. And, you know, he it was like, if you question him, it was like questioning that Santa Claus, not that, you know, like Santa Claus really hates you and that what Santa Claus is bringing you is going to make, you know, he just was just like this like mythical creature who has just given us so much. Like, how can you question granddad? I mean, he's here to help. And so he just never got a whole lot. He's really very, very rarely does Bill Gates get the questions he deserves. And then often you see interference run from him, for him, you know, calling anybody who does question him a conspiracy theorist. And I remember like that was one of the topics when I started asking questions about why he was going around talking about pandemics and vaccines as if he was a doctor. You know, people were like, because he's spent his whole life developing vaccines. I mean, how could you question Bill Gates? I mean, why would he do this? Like, why would he do this if it wasn't just for the betterment of humanity? There's just this, I don't know. And in that level structure, like he's just one of those people that he's just untouchable. It's just very weird.
Well, there is a lot to it, right? So his father worked very closely with Margaret Sanger, if you know who she is, and they worked to make Planned Parenthood, and that was a thing that was their accomplishment in the United States. And Bill Gates was very much in support of it. He spoke about it in interviews. How he I think there's a famous interview back in the 90s where he said. They asked him what he does in his spare time, and he said, "I spend a lot of time thinking about overpopulation." And then to see the ties between what his interests were, what his father's interests were, and then what the ilk that they hung out with, I can understand fully why people in Africa are very hesitant to get aid from people like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I took some questions from people ahead of time over on Locals for you. I haven't looked at all of them, so I hope we can answer them all while we're still on YouTube. If not, we'll just cut the stream and finish it up elsewhere. But if you're watching this somewhere else, go to alicetomorrow.locals.com and sign up. Become part of my editorial board. Then you can put questions in ahead of time for people like Clyde. So this Klaus Schwab geezer, the boss of Trudeau, says you will own nothing and you will be happy. Does Klaus own nothing? Because he never looks happy. All the participants attending Davos seem to own a lot. Basic question: how much does Klaus Schwab own?
A lot, actually. No, he owns a considerable amount, and a lot of what he's made through his organization, the World Economic Forum. So he was the son of Jürgen Schwab, who was a known Nazi. He was part of the SS, and he was an industrialist who he ran factories making, of all things, flamethrowers, which were later banned by the Geneva Convention. But that's where his initial wealth came from, and then he ended up making the World Economic Forum, which is basically just a rich people club that has a really, really expensive door price, I guess you'd call it, membership. But it's a hoity-toity club where it brings people together, and he actually does have plans. He's an economist, actually. That's what he went to school for, and he has plans. He's come up with his own treatise for economics. I happen to be from the Austrian School of Economics. I really like Ludwig von Mises's work. Also like the Chicago School. So all those people in the Chicago School, you can know that I like Friedman. Don't worry about it. But yeah, he's an economist, and he came up with a theory of stakeholder capitalism. And if you look into it, it's basically fascism with robots. It's really easy to sum it up that way. I mean, I joke about this stuff, but you can look into it yourself. He's got a lot of money. He gets it from these memberships to this this thing, and he wants to implement his new world, his new world order, if you want to call it that.
Well, yeah. So, when we were talking about the grift or the true believer, what do you think he is?
I think he's a true believer in his own BS.
Yeah.
But I think part of it's a grift. I think part of it's a grift. He's using people's greed. He figured out a way to use people's self-importance and self-indulgence in this way of like, hey, I'm part of this big organization that only hangs out with the big time, or the big time. And he uses that to enrich himself and enrich his family. And there's a whole lot of nepotism in that regard. But I think he's a true believer in his own ideology of this fourth industrial revolution. He believes that the fourth industrial revolution will be brought about not from mechanism like the first one, and then the division of labor, maybe that was the third, but the fourth is going to be AI coming to market and coming into place. And AI is going to be this malevolent thing that's going to take care of all of us. Yeah. No joke. That's what he believes.
Oh yeah. I totally believe that he buys into all of that. And I guess for me, it's so weird because the stuff I really like is a world where AI does nothing. Like, I like going out to my garden. I like training my horse. I like that, to me, to have AI doing stuff like, or a chip in my brain, stuff like that, I don't know. It just doesn't excite me. So I like, am I missing something? Am I a Neanderthal? Like, what's wrong with me that I like doing simple things and I don't want a computer to do everything for me?
Well, and that's the thing. A lot of people should be able to, and this is the whole thing about eat the bugs. I mean, if you want to eat the bugs, right? But the whole meme of eat the bugs is they want you to eat the bugs. Like, it's not going to be a choice. They want to replace certain proteins in people's diets and supplement it with bugs. Like, that's, I know it sounds like a crazy meme, but they're working on, cricket plants for human consumption and stuff like that. And they want to have a society. Yeah. They want a society where you don't really have a choice in the matter. You go and you do the efficient thing because AI told you this is what you as an organism should be doing. Right.
Okay.
But I think they're misjudging the whole situation. I don't think it's going to actually play out like that.
What do you think is going to happen?
I think AI is going to be dumber than we all thought. Like, I honestly think, and people who understand algorithms, they know that when you're talking with an AI right now, there are certain APIs where you can actually talk with them online, and you can ask me, give an argument for you being self-aware. A guest on Joe Rogan had this recently, and he explained this probably better than I can. But he said, if it gave you an explanation, it'll give you a very intricate explanation for why it believes it's self-aware, and it will be very convincing. But then ask it to convince you that it's not self-aware, and it'll give you an equally convincing argument of why it's not self-aware. It's not these things. We don't believe that they're self-aware. We don't believe that they're going to be super smart. It's going to be more of a nightmare if we put them in charge of anything. They're supplements, they're tools. Like a wrench helps you turn a nut. You have AI to help you solve difficult calculations, but these aren't the things for implementation of vast economies. And like a market economy is an interesting organic thing. And the more I learn about it, the just more fascinating it becomes.
I think I'm more concerned about the effect that it has on like human development, and then what humans become because of it, like Jello brains, and then they're just like robotically reacting to relationship like an algorithm would tell them to do so. I mean, just look at the last 6 to 8 years. One of the reasons I even started talking about the media, because I was just doing Airstream renovation on my YouTube channel, like totally mundane. I'd still have my job at DNR. Everything would be good. But I started talking about the media because when COVID narratives were spreading, I was watching people like break up with each other. And I saw it during the Trump administration too. People felt like because the media was pushing this it's a new threat of significant proportion we've never seen before. So we just have to do journalism and information differently under Trump, because it's just this threat that we've never seen before. And then COVID was like the next thing, where it was like, it's just this threat we've never seen before, and we just have to do journalism differently, basically silencing alternative voices, which we would call dangerous disinformation or whatever else. And the thing that was the saddest for me was just seeing like grandmas not being invited over for dinner, or brothers and sisters not talking to each other, or people getting divorced. All this stuff was just nuts to me, that there were even dating apps that were developing for people who were like vaccinated or unvaccinated. Like we're never even going to talk to each other anymore. So the AI part of how it frames the way that we relate with each other and think through our own lives, I think that's it's the existential side of it that makes me nervous about AI.
Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon, and you have to ask: is it all AI? Is it part of human nature? This fact that we can all communicate with each other at such a vast you can communicate with anyone you want at any given time, for the most part, in the world. And we also have this phenomenon that we now know about called mass formation. And it causes a lot of people to do a lot of things that they normally wouldn't do. Like they would do unethical things, thinking that they're doing the right thing. Like, I'm not going to report on this news, even though it is the truth of the matter. But I don't like this thing. We saw this happen. I mean, there are unethical people, but then there are when people in droves do unethical things, and they do them unethically together. But they do them in formation. And that's the whole idea of mass formation. And I've just been learning about this. I've been watching a lot about the mass formation concept. I just ordered a book, so I'll get more information about that later. But I think that in conjunction with AI, especially on Twitter and whatnot, a lot of the people you talk to on Twitter are not people. And a lot of people don't realize this, because AI is pretty good at what they do, and they can push this mass formation if the AI goes and tries to push people in a particular direction as well. So people see a lot of other people going towards this type of psychosis, thinking that it's the masses doing it, and they'll follow it. But it may just be a robot, and we know. We know for a fact that some of these bots, when you just let them go on the internet, become some of the most heinous individuals out there. Because I mean, you got to figure, they don't have organs and all this. They don't feel emotions. They're just like, oh, this is how humans interact with each other, and they go by the input that we put out there, and then they're like, okay, I'm just gonna double down on it. This is how people should interact.
Basically, you're saying they are just like the worst version of a human being. Is that kind of?
Yeah,
no
exactly.
empathy.
Going towards
They're a human with no empathy, basically. A
psychopath. Yeah.
There you go. Okay, a couple more questions from locals before I let you go. Where do you fall on the Justin Trudeau is Fidel Castro's son conspiracy?
I think it's funny. I think it's really funny that they happen to look alike too. At the end of the day, who cares? Who cares? Like, is it? What are we? Are communists because it's inherited through genetics? No, like it doesn't. I don't think it really matters. At the end of the day, he was raised by the other horrible Trudeau, in my opinion, and he got a lot of that from him. So whether or not he is Castro's kid is funny. It's just funny to me. It's a meme.
All right, this is an interesting question. I'm not sure where this comes from, but well, it comes from Tom on Locals, but I don't know what the end goal is in asking. Okay, interesting. The U.S. has a history of assassination attempts on the president. 9% died in office from is that supposed to be assassination, not assassination? 4.5% survived or were injured during the attempt. 34% survived the attempt with no injury. Does Canada have a similar history for the prime minister?
No, we don't have a similar we don't have a similar history. No. I can't think of any assassination attempts that I learned in my civics class. I just can't think of any. All I know is that we don't have to worry about that with Trudeau. He toes the line. I don't think I've ever seen an assassination that was attempted on someone who toed the line.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Think about that.
Has there been any polling on public opinion of Trudeau? What structure in Canadian government acts as a check on Trudeau?
I think right now he stands at 7% approval rate for Canadians. 7%.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
That was the last
surprising because
poll
I
that
thought,
heard.
because I thought it was the opposite. I thought like a lot of Canadians really liked him.
No, no,
Hmm.
I don't think I know a soul who does. I
How
really
did he
don't
get
think I do.
reelected?
We have a multiple party system. So we don't have just two parties or two major parties. We have three major parties. And so that you can get a minority government, which is what he has. So the popular vote was against him, but he got seats in the biggest ridings, which is mostly Ontario and Quebec, where he has a lot of his support. This is why he originally won on voter reform. We were supposed to get what would be similar to like an electoral college in Canada under this voter reform. And he realized that no, he was doing better without that. As long as Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Alberta, and British Columbia didn't get the vote, he'll be able to at least keep a minority government in office. But yeah, there's three parties: the Liberals, which is his party, the NDP, which is the lefter party from him, and then there's the Conservatives. Those are the main major parties.
Somebody on Locals in the live chat was asking, what do you think of Trudeau's refusal to answer questions from Rebel News reporters such as Alexa Lavoitek? Am I saying that right?
Lavoie. It's just Lavoie.
Lavoie.
Yeah, it was a tragic moment in Canadian history that a prime minister would look at a particular news agency, whether they lean a particular way or not. That's irrelevant. I mean, you have all kinds of news agencies that lean in all kinds of particular ways. But to deny answering a question blatantly, and he tends to do a lot of these moments in French and not in English because it won't get the international coverage because it's in French.
Oh, right. Tricky.
Yeah. So his big statement where he called the unvaccinated mostly misogynistic racists and they take up space. He actually said that they take up space. That was on a French television show. So he said it in French, so it didn't quite get the airtime around the world. But yeah, I think it was tragic that any sitting prime minister would say to a particular news agency, I don't answer questions from your agency.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of brings us back to what we started talking about at the beginning, where they're like, no, reporters should be respected. We would never, it's like, what? You got, I don't know. I mean, it seems like it's just, it's common practice that whatever they define as journalism is just not how I define it, I guess. No. I just, we don't look at it the same way.
No, I agree with you there.
Let's go back real fast to this. Oh yeah, the check. How does the Canadian government work? Checks and balances. Like, who's the check on Trudeau?
Who's the check on Trudeau? It's supposed to be the Parliament. So they have you have your opposition party. So we have the three parties. The other sides are supposed to be oppositions. So it's supposed to be the NDP are in opposition, as well as the Conservatives in opposition of his party. And the NDP, they have an unofficial coalition now with the Liberals, and they've formed a coalition and vote in lockstep with each other, so that there's no opposition there. And then the Conservative Party has their seats in Parliament. And then generally you have question period where they ask each other questions. You have to do it in a really weird passive-aggressive way through the Speaker of the House. And you can't address the question. You have to ask. It's very passive-aggressive. It's frustrating to watch. And they just don't answer the question. So when it comes to checks and balances, we're supposed to have like judiciary, but they seem to be a lot of politically appointed judges, as we see here in Canada now, as well as a lot of appointees like the Minister of Justice, which would be like your justice minister or whatever. I can't remember what you call it in the States. Sorry. Minister of Justice.
Like the Department of Justice?
Yeah. So in the Department of
Attorney
Justice.
General or something like
yeah,
that?
you have the Attorney General. That's right. Sorry
Okay.
for my blank on that one. But we have our Minister of Justice in Canada is part of Justin Trudeau's cabinet. And we have a case that happened a number of years ago where Jody Wilson-Raybould, he appointed her, and he got all of his points in the media for appointing a woman who happened to be Native, which I don't think should be a qualifier, but she happened to be qualified for the job. And there was a case where a nepotistic company in Quebec was under investigation, and she saw the case. She wanted to go forward with prosecuting the case and prosecuting that company. And there was pressure from Trudeau to stop the case. And he tried pressuring her to stop the case, which is illegal, even though they're in the same cabinet, which there should be a separation there. But he fired her and got in another guy and put him in place. And that guy didn't go forward with the investigation. So these are problems that we have with our system that we definitely need remedy for, but we have to do it through the proper channels, and we'll have to do it by electing the reputable members of parliament.
Yeah, there's just similar dynamics here where like you appoint someone to do the job of ethics, for instance, and then they tell you you're being unethical, and you're like, you're out of here. I'll just hire somebody who tells me I am being ethical. And, just cycle goes round and round. Okay, there's one request for you to get on the locals, if you could. Somebody wants you to get on the locals. Another person says, in his book on tyranny, historian Tim Snyder writes, do not obey in advance. The media have a tendency to float ideas of restrictions on freedom like this one, and people freak about it, and governments play denying it, etc. At one point, the question is, whatever Trudeau or anyone else in a position of abusing their power says, what are we willing to stand for? What are Canadian reporters willing to stand for? Any thoughts on that? Do the Canadian reporters see themselves that way? I mean, if I was getting paid by the government, I don't know if I'd have the same perspective on holding the government accountable if they were paying my bills. I don't know.
I think it goes deeper than that. I think traditionally there used to be reporters always felt themselves aligned with the working class traditionally. And I think there's been a flip in the culture in the past few decades where reporters tend to align themselves more with like elite circles. And they reckon themselves not to be part of the dirty middle class or the dirty lower classes, when they used to be the bastions of showing the middle class heroism. Now it's all about aggrandizing so you can get into these like elite circles yourself, and it's nepotistic and it's terrible.
It definitely does here push you in that direction, even if you didn't start out that way, because if you want to move up higher in your career, you're going to end up in a big city like in LA or New York or Seattle in my case. And, you tend to go to the same colleges, and then you move into these urban environments, and you may spend 6 months in a small town somewhere, but, you leave that behind. And then it's just so incestuous. All of the reporters all hang out together. Very few of them have like interests outside of reporting that take them into worlds where they meet people who are very different. I think in my particular case, I grew up riding horses, and that was like a saving grace for me because I met people, cowboys, cowgirls, like folks from all over the economic spectrum who had different uses for horses or what, there are ranchers and that kind of thing. And it just, because I love horses, I've always been in touch with people who are just different and living in places outside of cities, because that's where people tend to ride horses. And, just unintentionally, I think that kept me from becoming like a very insulated city elite. And I just preferred the people in the country because they didn't talk about work all the time. I got sick and tired of talking about work. I don't like going to bars and talking about work. That wasn't fun for me. So, okay. Final question from locals. Although some assume America has some unique freedom of speech in our Constitution, every nation has a guarantee given it is natural law. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms assures freedom of speech. Are Canadians taking legal action against this violation of freedom?
So there's a lot to unpack there. Not all places agree with natural law. They don't all uphold that. I believe in natural law. I think that freedom stems from the concept of self-ownership. You can't have freedom unless you start from your base principles. I'm a first principles person. I just go that way because I have a mechanical brain. Everything has to start from a base somewhere. But the concept of freedom is a lot of the first principles that we hear about from the founding fathers, but the first bit is self-ownership. And I think this is why these policies have been such an egregious step on people's freedoms, is because it hits us right at the core of where our freedoms stem from. The idea that a government can come in and say what you're going to do with your body is the most egregious infringement on people's rights. And the argument in retaliation to that would be that, well, you're not being forced to do it. You can choose not to, but there's an element of coercion. And once that coercion's there, then it is a violation of your freedoms. But the question stemming that how are we going to do it differently in Canada?
Would you take legal action against?
Yes, the legal action. So there is a lot of legal action being taken, and Brian Peckford, who is the last living signatory of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada, because it was only written in the 1960s, right? It's not that old in Canada, or no, it was 1982, I believe, 81, but there was drafts in the 60s. But the idea is that he's suing based on, and he couldn't go after the whole thing because it's so egregious. It steps on so many of the fundamental things in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada. So he went after the one he knew he would win in the Supreme Courts as soon as it got up to a higher court, because they've been kicking it down since. But he's involved in a case where he's going after the right of travel, the right to freely travel to and from, or even leave the country and come back without having these strict restrictions imposed on any Canadian citizen. So this has turned into a big case. This is being fought by lawyers from the Justice for Constitutional Freedoms in Canada. And it's an ongoing battle. There are other cases that are going forward, but you can only take one case to court at a time.
Okay, can I ask you for my final quick topic, what you thought about this whole freak out over Justin Trudeau's hair? Do you think this was intentional restructuring of his image? Do you think he fell asleep in the chair and somebody that doesn't like him was doing his hair and they just went for it? Why does he look like this now? And what was your reaction to the reaction it got?
So my first thought was I thought that maybe his barber refused to get the booster. So, federal employees can't stick around, so he tried to cut it himself. I don't know why he cut his hair. Stupid. I mean, what are you gonna do? He's got a stupid haircut, and it's funny because it's sort of like his strength is his beauty, right? And that's always been his thing.
That's what Rogan said. I mean, it made me think of it because like when Rogan was talking about how you guys are communists now and you have to get rid of Trudeau, when he said why he liked Trudeau at first, he goes, because he's good looking. I mean, that was his whole reason. He's like good looking. I mean, what else did Trudeau have going for him? I don't know.
He's good looking. He's trust fund baby. Yeah, like he has money, so he's in the moneyed circles. And then it was the fact that he had ties to someone who was a prime minister, his father, right? And his father was arguably the worst prime minister up until him. that's been the opinion for a lot of Canadians. But there was a lot of people that liked senior Trudeau. Apparently, there's a lot less that likes junior. And now he doesn't have cool hair.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, does it really matter? Probably not. However, the skeptic in me is like, if this, like you said, if it's his power, what happened? Like these people here are writing that they're trying to give him maybe a more business-like, sober appearance. for whatever reason.
No, he just looks like a dummy now. He just like before he looked like a mimbo. Now he looks like a washed up mimbo. You know what I mean? He's a male bimbo. He's a dummy. He's not a smart guy.
Like if I went and somebody cut my hair too short, the reason would probably be, and I'm going to have to get my hair cut eventually. I haven't gotten my hair cut in a year and a half, I think it's been, since anyone has touched my hair other than basically me and my daughter pulling on it. But I would have the reason of like, just cut it really short so I don't have to get my hair cut again for another year and a half. But like this guy, I mean, if it's that important to his image, like I just question if there's, let's just see what happens. Let's see what happens if like all of a sudden the Netherlands guy gets his hair cut and Klaus Schwab, well, he's bald, so that's not going to happen. But let's just see. Let's see if they all like start popping up with shorter haircuts and then what comes of that. If there's like is
this an elite trend? This is a new elite trend?
That's what I'm wondering. Or like they're going to come out with some study that says like longer hair was worse for the environment or something. I'm just waiting for something to come out like that.
I could see that. That's just absurd.
It just seems weird. Okay, well, everybody go subscribe to Clyde Do Something's channel. Any final closing thoughts for your fans who are watching?
Just for everyone watching, pay attention to what's happening in Canada. We generally pay attention the other way. We know a lot more about American politics than Americans, I think, know about what's going on here. But I think right now we're in a really crucial time. Food shortages are on their way, and this is a global thing. I mean, you can forget about it. You don't have to forget about it. I've forgotten about the pandemic. It's not even really in my purview these days, as much as I report on it because, people in office want to bring back masks in Canada. I mean, we still do. We still required to wear masks on an airplane. It's ludicrous over here. But pay attention to what's happening in Canada, especially with the farming situation, because this is going to really affect the United States. I think this is going to hit you guys pretty hard, just like it's going to hit us pretty hard. And we need to stand together in solidarity. We're part of the same continent. We share one of the longest land borders in the world, and we share a culture. We're virtually the same culture of people. So let's rally together and make good things happen in the future here. And
soon we may all be forced to get short haircut. Who knows? We'll see. Subbed Clyde, great show. So hopefully you'll get some more subscribers. Again, everybody, this is what his channel looks like. Clyde Do Something. Hey, actually, real last question. What's the name? Do Something. Where'd you come up with your title?
So it used to be Clyde's Soapbox, and that's what I called my channel. I don't know why. It was nice. It was just a channel, threw it up there. And then at one point, I was doing a collaboration with some other people, and I was always the one that did everything in that. and that became like an inside joke. So like everyone would say, Clyde, do something, because they all knew that I was doing all the, like I did the production, we did live streams, and I did all the producing on the show. And that became a joke. And I thought it was funny when I wanted to rebrand, and I didn't know what to put. So in the meantime, I just put Clyde Do Something. And then I had no idea it was going to take off in this iteration of branding.
Well, I think it's very cool to be able to talk to you. And it's also very cool that I get to see the diversity of the people who are coming out of the woodwork to question very powerful people that you wouldn't necessarily expect. And I just appreciate what you do, because even though mild industry, I don't think appreciates those voices the way that they should.
It's competition, direct competition.
Yeah, and I think they do see it not just as competition, but I think a lot of them see it as oh gosh, I don't know, like the inmates are taking over the prison or something. Oh my God, we got a jailbreak or something. Like, what are all these people? They're somehow they're influencing the minds that we're supposed to be influencing, and they're getting all these other ideas that we didn't say that they were allowed to have. But it's just cool because, like I had, I've had a guy who, a couple actually, who were like truck drivers. And like one of them, the Naturalist Capitalist podcast, like he's Reed Coverdale. I mean, the guy is so smart. And I just thought about being in mainstream news, like, I like you said earlier, thinking about this elitist club where it'd be like, oh, a truck driver, like, what do they know? We're the people who know everything. And I just think it's been really interesting to see all the different kinds of people that have come out in the alternative media sphere over the last couple of years who have interesting ideas critiquing the system that show my old industry that, like, just because you went to journalism school or you went to some Ivy League school or whatever, that doesn't mean you know anything. And and I don't know, I hope maybe someday, I don't know if it really will happen, but someday it gives the opportunity, at least, for people in that state of mind to be humbled a little bit and say, maybe I've got something to learn. Maybe I'm not, I'm not necessarily this this authority like I thought I was, and I should, I don't know, listen to people who I may have otherwise written off. That's my hope.
Well,
I know that
it's really funny to me because one of the big insults for people that are like blue collar workers or whatever is you get this from white collar workers. Read a book. You're like, it's the insinuation that you're an idiot. And what a lot of them don't realize is there's a website called Amazon. It's been around for a while, and they sell books, and they've been selling books to blue collar workers for a long time. A lot of them. You don't get that kind of book sales unless you're selling to the masses of the people. And what's been happening is as economies have grown and people have more free time, they've been reading more books and educating themselves on a lot of these topics that universities have been neglecting, honestly, and people are learning.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised how many knowledgeable people there are out there that didn't have opportunities to go to higher learning, ended up in other vocations, but did it in their spare time and know considerable things.
Well, and because of, I think, because of their being outside the system. I mean, I think maybe in my case, one of my saving graces is that I didn't study journalism. So I wasn't like a groupie, and I didn't feel I didn't have any identity affiliation with journalists. So I don't see myself like, I don't need you. I don't have that same kind of complex. Like, how am I going to do this if I leave the corporate news and I don't have the logo behind me? Like, I just wasn't a groupie. And I think not studying the world in the way that normally a journalist is trained, like, was probably a saving grace for me, because I didn't care if I did things differently. I didn't even know the way to do it right. I didn't know their way of doing things. So I just did it my way. And
that's not what attracts people, though. What attracts people the most is just being genuine.
Yeah, I agree.
If you come out and this is why people love the long live stream formats and long conversations, because you can just talk with somebody and everything's on the table. Everything's out there. And yeah, you can pull a persona, but when you do it long enough, I mean, your own personality is going to slip. And that's what people want to see. And that's what people are tuning into. And it turns out that they don't want the Dan Rather or whatever every night at that time.
Yeah.
They want to tune in when they want, and they want to tune into the people that they think are genuine.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think being authentic is a huge seller. One final thought. I remember a peer of mine who's still in the news business back when the vaccines were first rolling out. And I said, hey, just be aware that this is a very powerful propaganda campaign. Just do your research, since you're in the news business. And, they were partnering with the governments to do these like public health campaigns where they were like basically pushing people to get vaccinated, and thought they were doing a public service by pairing with the government on that. Like, just do your diligence and like do some research and see that this is one of the greatest propaganda campaigns in a long time. And she goes, well, we're gonna have to agree to disagree about that. But I understand why people are skeptical, because they just don't know. They just don't know. And that's why we're here. We're here to help. I'm like, no, see, that's one of the biggest problems with people in that legacy media world, is that they think the problem is that the public resists them because they just don't know. But the reality is they resist them because they do know. They know a lot more than the people in the corporate press, and that's why they don't want to listen to them. It's the total opposite. It has nothing to do with they just don't know better, and maybe we just need to get better at communicating our good points. It's like actually they're calling BS on your points. They're bad points, and they know a lot more than you think they do. And until you understand that truth, you're never going to really make it with the skeptics.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that.
Okay, well, we both have kids. We're both Pacific time. It's dinner. Maybe you already ate. I haven't fed my family yet, so you did? Okay, well, I got to go. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Go to Clyde Do Something's channel. Clyde, thanks again for coming on and taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.